Afternoon. It's an afternoon that feels like morning again. I accidentally gave Peter Callahan a scoop this morning. Sorry to everybody else. So when we left here last night, Senator Miller, Governor Walz, and I had a tentative agreement. I sort of thought it was confidential because we hadn't worked out all the language yet, but we didn't talk about that. We usually talk about what are we going to say, when are we going to say it, to make sure that we can talk to our caucuses first. But Senator Miller was on the radio this morning and it came up and he answered a question. So even though we don't have a written document yet, we're waiting for that from the reviser. The agreement became public, and so I'm happy to answer any questions about it. I'm sure you've heard the parameters, $2.7 billion to fully replenish the unemployment insurance trust fund and avoid any tax increases on Minnesota businesses. Puts us in the position that we were before COVID-19 started. We doubled the frontline worker bonus pot from $250 million to $500 million. And what that will mean is approximately $750 checks to 667,000 frontline workers. Part of the agreement is that it's the House, largely the House language on the pool and the distribution. And then the third issue that was addressed is the expenditure of American Rescue Plan dollars. When we left in June of 2021, we left $1.15 billion or so of American Rescue Plan dollars on the bottom line to be appropriated in this legislative session. And so in the agreement last night, we agreed that $190 million would be available to the governor for ongoing COVID management, but that the remainder of the American Rescue Plan dollars would be appropriated by the legislature and the governor in this agreement. So I think those are all the pieces, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Can you talk about the 750? How is it going to work if not everybody applies? Will those checks maybe go up or down based on that?
Those are really good questions for deeds and for the folks who are on the frontline worker group. My understanding is that there's a certain point in time that there's a redistribution of money amongst the applicants if they're, the initial, payments, if there's extra money after that first round. So that's part of the language that's being written right now. When we've been talking about frontline workers all along, we've always kind of quoted a range of bonus checks that frontline workers would get, understanding there would be some rate of failure to apply.
You're not, just to be clear, Senator Miller thought this too, that you're not putting 750 in the language. You would,
Right.
It would be just, that number would change if there were fewer than 600 and some thousand that apply.
Exactly. So the language will not say $750. If every single member of the pool applied, they would receive $750. If a fewer number than that apply for the bonuses, the checks could be larger.
There were amendments that went on that bill on the House floor when it passed in February. One was flight attendants, the other one was doctors, I think became eligible. Are you using the House's eligibility list? Those people would still be eligible?
We are, but we have income qualifications, which I really should have looked at before I came here. So in House File 2900, we did have some income qualifications. So although there are certain medical professionals that people would think of as highly compensated, like doctors in there, it would be a pretty small subset of doctors who would qualify under the income qualifications.
And,
Sorry, Theo, go ahead.
Dolly just told me that they're going to wait until the bill is signed in order to start building the online portal. Shouldn't they have been doing that already?
No, because nothing is certain until it's done at the legislature, right? This is a theoretical deal and a theoretical agreement that won't be something that the agencies can act on pursuant to law until it is law. And it won't be law until it passes the Senate and then the House and gets to the governor's desk. I expect that to happen. I expect it to pass the Senate tonight, either very late or outside possibility they would come in tomorrow. I don't know if Senator Miller spoke to this. We'll be here all day tomorrow. We'll be here, we're having a, not really a speedy debate on the environment bill, so we'll be here all day today. And I would expect the governor will get the bill on Friday and sign it.
Did you adopt the House provisions to refund the businesses that already paid that tax?
Yes.
Leader Miller said that there might be language to extend the deadline, because Commissioner Grove is now saying that it's too late to give people a new bill. So is that going to be in the extension of the deadline, or will businesses just have to pay and get a refund?
That was one of the pieces that still was a little bit in flux as we left last night, because all of us want those businesses to get a refund as soon as possible. But we do recognize that the agency needs some time to implement the new law.
You said it was double of the agreement of last year, but it's half of what you had passed on Monday, the 1 billion. I mean, are you frustrated that it wasn't closer to that $1 billion number?
Absolutely, I'm frustrated. I can't imagine how Senate Republicans can look at our frontline workers and say that they didn't earn a $1,500 bonus. And when you look at what people lived through when the pandemic started, and we had all this uncertainty, not enough PPE, we have police officers, firefighters, nurses, grocers, dealing with the public, not knowing how bad this virus could be, how likely they were to get sick, if it would kill a family member of theirs because they were going to work. And then you look at what they went through during Omicron and Delta, and remember what this state was like in January when there was that crushing load of the intensive care patients from Delta were still in the hospital. And we had this new tremendous load of Omicron patients. I don't understand how Senate Republicans can say that after COVID-19, we want to give businesses $2.7 billion to put them where they were before COVID-19, but we're unwilling to recognize what workers went through. I don't understand that, but we had to eventually decide whether frontline workers were going to get a bonus or there'd be a risk of nothing.
Just in terms of what tone this sets going forward, there are a couple ways of looking at it. Is that it shows you guys can get a deal, but then also you've taken away the federal money, which was one of the things keeping Republicans at the table, deciding what to do with that money. Where do you think this comes down in terms of guiding the rest of the session?
It was very hard to get the Republicans to the table. And I think, I've expressed this on several occasions, that it was concerning because it led us to believe that perhaps they'd rather have things blow up and that they would just rather use issues as a tool in the campaign. So we had to work incredibly hard, and harder than we should have, to get them to the table. But I do think, after lots more communication with Senator Miller, that the Senate is really interested in passing budget bills and a tax bill. I know that they're keenly interested in it, at a minimum, passing a couple of budget bills and a tax bill. So I think there's still plenty of leverage on the table. And now I feel like the playing field is more level between Democrats and Republicans. And the reason is reinsurance was under a time crunch. We had to act quickly. The governor and the Senate Republicans were pretty much in the same spot on that. Under UI, we were under a time crunch, and the governor and Senate Republicans had the same position on that. Now, as we go into budget negotiations, I feel like it's more of a new playing board.
Do you feel that your caucus will be on board with a smaller amount of money than, I know many passionate people wanted to see $1 billion?
Yeah, we talked about it in caucus today, and I think we're all of the same mind. I think I have a pretty good read of where my caucus is. I think they're a practical group of people who want to get things done, and they would much rather get $750 checks for frontline workers than nothing. And our pool was very important to us because our pool included in it some of the lowest paid workers who were on the front lines during this pandemic, including the meat packers and grocery store workers.
When will you start talking about the bonding bill?
We're already talking about the bonding bill.
What's happening?
Well, the conversations are pretty preliminary at this point.
Is there a ballpark figure for how much is left on the table for these other budget bills?
Well, there's a projected state surplus of about $15 billion over the next 3 years. And the deals that we have reached so far, we've spent somewhere between 4 and 5. So there's $10 billion more to discuss.
4 and 5 includes the amount in this deal that comes from the surplus?
Yeah, we can all do math together. So with there being 10 billion in '23, it's 1 billion ARPA, it's 9.3 general fund. And in the out years, it is 6 billion, actually. So that would be 16 billion. The reinsurance was 891 million. And this deal is 2.7 plus 500 plus 190.
The governor's talked about, in recent days, about staging, given some of the big things coming up, Mother's Day, the conventions, et cetera. When do you think you realistically have to have some sort of broader agreement in place to land this smoothly?
May 13th.
So that's when you're talking to Peter next?
I think it also actually happens to be on Friday the 13th, now that I think about it. I think the governor's fishing opener is Saturday the 14th, but so in order for the reviser to have enough time, the reviser probably have a heart attack when he hears that date that I've just thrown out there, but I really think for the reviser to have enough time to get everything done, that's when we need to have agreements finalized. And that may be like, we need to have kind of some other things done prior to that, because there's always a second round of questions, right? Like, let's say we give the tax chairs a certain number, and then they go work, and they get to an impasse on certain items, and they want more direction after that. So there's kind of like 2 rounds of agreements that have to happen. But I think by May 13th, there should be a pretty good idea where we're headed.
Do you plan to have votes next week on the sports betting and the liquor bills?
Well, we're still trying to figure that out because the Senate bills are stuck in committee. And so we're trying to figure out, given that the House is ready to rock and roll, how we get that conversation moving forward with our Senate colleagues since they can't get their bills out of committee.
Have you had any discussions with Senator Miller about sports betting specifically? I think it was just a few days ago, he said that the racetracks aren't on board, and that is a non-starter for the Senate Republicans.
I have not talked to Senator Miller at all about sports betting.
Do you believe the governor when he says he will not call any sort of special session, meaning you're closed, you're just waiting for the reviser to get bills together? Is that a hard threat on his part? Have you talked about that?
We haven't had that conversation. I will just say I recall under Governor Dayton that there were times where we were pretty much done, but we did need to process. And so then there was an agreement to get the processing done, essentially extend the session. Maybe there's a room for interpretation there of like sort of extending the regular session versus calling a special session.
Yeah, that's in statute.
All right.
Just to be clear, you're thinking that since if the Senate's not able to take this up until tonight, you won't stick around tonight. The House will come back tomorrow.
Right, it's been my practice not to keep people here past midnight. And since we're coming in tomorrow anyway at 11 to do another budget bill, if we don't do it tonight, my hope would be we could do it right away tomorrow.
Madam Speaker, if we actually put it past sports book, and then that'd be another number on the bottom line, where does that money go?
I don't think we'd be counting that and allocating that in any budget agreements this year.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.